Hey everybody, Sarah C. Netto here. Since right now we're in the midst of the holiday season, you might find yourself hanging out with a lot of family and friends and you don't have much time to write and then you maybe feel bad about that. So today I thought I'd do a video about how you can kind of get your writer's brain going even when you're just watching movies. I'm no film expert, I'm not a screenplay writer, I write novels and short stories. So you could kind of take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt, but these are the types of things that I do when I watch movies and TV that I think help me to think of even more ideas for my own writing, and it kind of helps me learn more about writing and apply those ideas. So hopefully you'll find something helpful in all of this, and if not, first of all, it'll help you out if you familiarize yourself with story structure in kind of its various forms. So you could get a book like, so I've read Christopher Vogler's The Writer's Journey, which was published in 1992. And it's kind of a screenwriter's take on the hero's journey. And it kind of simplifies Joseph Campbell's The Hero of a Thousand Faces. It makes it a little easier to digest for writers. I will say, though, that the copy of the book I read had some pretty dated movie references when I read it. Some of them I hadn't even heard of before. I guess be prepared for that if you decide to read that book, but I found it really helpful. You could also read some books like Save the Cat. You can also just research all of these things online, whether it's like the 3-act formula, the 7-point plot structure. There are a lot of different ways to kind of boil down stories, like novels or screenplays or movies. So you might want to look into some of those, wrap your mind around like the sort of science or the structure behind storytelling. Now, you don't just have to read books or just search random web pages to find out some of this stuff. There's also some great podcasts that you could listen to. One of my favorites is Writing Excuses. That one goes over a lot about story structure, and it has like probably 13 seasons at this point. So there's a lot of great material to listen to there to help you out. Something else would be watching video essays or other writing channels on YouTube. Some of my favorite video essay type channels that analyze film in particular through a writer's lens are Lessons from the Screenplay and Just Right. So those are really great places to start if you maybe you're more used to kind of watching movies as a form of relaxation or entertainment, and you're not really thinking about your writer's brain is maybe not on as much when you're watching them. And so kind of learning to look at storytelling and movies in a different way could kind of help you out. So when you begin the movie that you've decided you're going to not just watch, but analyze, make sure you pay attention to the first few minutes and even the opening shot. And so you could almost think as you're watching it, how all of it would translate to a novel. And I think that's a helpful exercise to do throughout watching the movie. Just for everything, kind of imagine, what would this be like if it was novelized? If I was writing this story as a novel, how would I try to communicate what I'm seeing on screen on the page? And sometimes it's not so easy because in movies, a lot of things are shown visually, or everything's shown visually. Most of the story is kind of just told through dialogue and visually. So in the first few minutes, you're going to want to look at what the setting is, what tone or mood is created, how the main character is introduced. Like, is the main character introduced, like the opening image of the movie is like a close-up on a cigarette, and then we zoom out to see someone's face and they're like shrouded in shadow from a low hat, like Humphrey Bogart style. Like, is that the way we're introduced to this character? Or is it someone trolloping around in a field, singing and twirling and laying it back in the flowers? Like, those are two very different characters, very different ways to introduce characters. And so you want to kind of think about, like, how is the film setting up who this person is? Because novels are so much about character and so much about, the journey of a character, as are movies, right? So you want to kind of think of, like, how the movie sets up who this person is, what their world is, where we're at, kind of what's going on, and how they're doing that in a really short time frame. Because usually a lot of this is done in just a few minutes. So pay special attention to that and kind of think about how that would translate to, like, the first chapter of the book, or the first 2 chapters of a book, or even the first page of a book. How would that work? Could you do that? So next, you might want to consider or pay special attention to dialogue. If you need to, you could always turn on the subtitles, even if the movie is in your native language, just because you would then not miss any of the dialogue. Now, of course, if you're reading the subtitles, you're going to miss some of the images and gestures. That's just the way it goes. But it kind of depends. You could always watch it twice if you wanted to. With the dialogue, try to pay attention to, like, do different characters, do they talk in the same way? Do they talk differently? Do they use different terms? Something that I find particularly interesting with dialogue in movies, because usually it has to be so economical because it has to carry so much weight, is just to see what is revealed through dialogue. So I kind of love in movies, especially ones I've already seen before, looking and seeing how much exposition they reveal through the dialogue. Because, again, it's not, unless we have like a Star Wars sort of, the script at the beginning that kind of goes up the words. When we don't have that, generally in movies, we have to rely on just the gestures, just the actions, just the dialogue to know what's going on and what the characters' histories are. So in a book, you can just write it out, Jane did this. And in a movie, you have to try and convey what Jane's past is in a hopefully non-clunky sort of way. So it's very interesting to look at and pay attention to the dialogue and see how do they reveal the characters' backstories, what are they revealing about the plot, what are they revealing about who the characters really are, and how is it moving the plot forward, things like that. So pay attention to the dialogue. Use subtitles if you need to. Besides the dialogue, the other main way that a lot of information tends to be conveyed is through the character's actions, sometimes physical gestures, nonverbal cues. And so you also want to pay attention to, even the character's positions. Like, are they kind of like, one of these? Or is it someone who's aggressive and all up in your face? Are they leaning forward? Are they leaning back? And there's a lot that you could go into with like the angles of the camera and where the camera's at. And that's more like watching movies 201 kind of thing. So I won't go into that because I'm not an expert on it either. I only know a little bit. Angle up, angle down. You might pay attention to just the actual placement of the characters, the placement of the props, where everything's situated, how people are moving in relation to one another. And again, how would that translate if it was in a book? And kind of think of it that way. What more do they have to do physically because we can't just throw in the one-liner there? So something that I always do, and I started doing it unconsciously, and then I realized I was doing it at some point, and so it's something that you might want to do too, is to watch the progression of time in a movie. So as I'm watching it, whether it's on my computer or on the screen, I will frequently hit the button so I can see the time bar of where we're at. Are we 10 minutes in, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes? Like, is it halfway? Is it 3/4 of the way? How much time is left? 5 minutes? And this isn't because I'm like, oh, when is this movie going to be over or something? I'm not thinking that. Instead, I'm kind of trying to fit where the movie is at with what I'm seeing at what point in the sort of screenplay, or what point in the book, if it was a book, what point are we at? Are we 1/3 of the way through? Have we reached the inciting incident? Have we reached the midpoint? Have we reached the climax? And so sometimes if you really love a movie, it might really closely follow a story structure that you like. Like the beats that it hits, the plot points it hits might really fit in with like the way you like to write a book or the way you like to read a book. You might notice that those things are happening at the exact spot that you want. Like you notice that maybe there's either a false victory or false defeat type thing or some sort of reversal right smack dab like at the midpoint, almost exactly halfway through. And you might find that if you're feeling like the movie's dragging or it's boring or there's something kind of off about it, you might notice like what might be the midpoint happens 2/3 of the way through the movie, and that's why the first part felt so boring. Or you might notice that, oh, it's 25 minutes in, and just now the thing that's the inciting incident is happening. No wonder I thought it was boring. And maybe in the future I could talk about specific movies with this type of thing, but for now I'll just give you just the general stuff. So I do carefully pay attention to the time as I'm watching a movie and try to figure out, how did this lines up with that story structure stuff we talked about earlier. Another thing to think about, especially as the movie's wrapping up or getting towards the end, is how do you feel about it? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? Why? Why not? So always ask why, right? What were your expectations going into it? Were they satisfied? Were they met? Because a lot of times I notice with movies, probably even more than books, I notice that if I go in, I already peeked at the reviews and they said it sucked. So then I go in and I'm like, oh, that wasn't so bad, actually. Pretty good. And so you might notice that your expectations really are going to affect how you view the movie and how much you enjoy the movie. So you can kind of reflect on that and think about what were you expecting and what was it actually like. You might consider the ending. Was the ending satisfying or was it a disappointment, and why? And then you can again go back to some of that, all the story structure stuff you might have researched and think, was the climax satisfying? What did it feel like that was the movie had been building up to? Was there any fault with it? And also a good exercise is to think, what would you have done to change it to make it better? So if you think a movie's perfect and has no issues, then I guess you could learn just by studying the movie and trying to replicate the way it structured itself or the way it was created. But a lot of times you'll find when you start looking really closely at movies like this, you're going to find issues with like the character or the story structure, the way the plot goes down. And so you might think, I would have done this, or what if they had put this character at this point? What if they had moved the midpoint earlier? What if the climax had involved these two events happening closer together or something like that? So you might want to consider what you would have done differently to make the movie better. Like if you were going to rewrite it. And so just a fun little exercise. And of course you can start comparing and contrasting the movie that you just watched to other movies, whether in the same genre or in different genres, kind of as an exercise. So you could think, how does the plot of something like Rogue One compare with The Force Awakens? Or you could look at the different Harry Potter movies. You could look at the Avengers movies, Marvel movies, whatever. So you could look at movies that are kind of sort of similar or within a similar genre and setup and kind of see like, do they have any changes to the story structure? Are there any differences in the way they're written and the way they sort of tell the story on the screen? Or are they really just like the same thing with slight changes? Because sometimes once you notice that, it'll really open movies up for you. It could make them all a little more boring or predictable, which I'm sorry if it does that to you, but it will also probably make you a better writer, a more critical reader and film viewer, among other things. Happy holidays. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to talk more about how do you watch movies or what you're working on writing right now and do you need a break from it, how's it going with revising, drafting, whatever, comment below. I'll chat with you down there. If you've got other tips, let me know. If there's anything that you might want me to make a video about, just let me know and I'll get to it. Thanks for watching. Happy film viewing and writing, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.